They called John Rossi the King of Manhattan. He controlled the ports, the unions, and the police. He thought the world was his chessboard, and everyone else was just a pawn. But the night he decided to humiliate a quiet waitress at a jazz club in Tribeca, he made the last mistake of his life. He thought he was teaching her a lesson about power. He didn't know he was staring into the eyes of a ghost he'd been running from for 10 years. What happens when the hunter becomes the prey? You won't believe how this ends. The rain over New York City wasn't washing the sins away. It was just making the streets slicker for the predators. John Rossi watched the downpour from the back of his armored Rolls-Royce, Phantom 8. The city lights smeared against the tinted glass like streaks of blood. At 32, John was the youngest Don the Rossi crime family had ever seen, and easily the most vicious. He wore 3-piece bespoke suits from Savile Row, drank Macallan M, and hadn't heard the word no since he buried his father 3 years ago. "We're here, boss," his driver, a massive brute named Luca, grunted. They were parked outside the Velvet Room, a moody, high-end jazz lounge in Tribeca that had recently become the playground for the city's elite. It was neutral ground, or at least it was supposed to be. To John, there was no such thing as neutral ground. There was only territory he owned, and territory he was about to conquer. John adjusted his Patek Philippe Nautilus, the diamonds catching the street lamp's glare, and stepped out. Luca and 2 other guards, Adrian and Cole, flanked him instantly. They moved like a pack of wolves in Italian wool. Inside, the club was dim, smelling of expensive leather, cigar smoke, and old money. A saxophone wailed in the corner, cutting through the low hum of conversation. As John walked in, the room shifted. Conversations paused, heads dipped, the air grew heavier. That was the Rossi effect. "Table for Rossi," Adrian barked at the maitre d'. "Of course, Mr. Rossi, right this way. The VIP booth is prepared." They were led to a secluded, semicircular booth upholstered in crushed red velvet, overlooking the main floor. John sank into the seat, spreading his arms along the backrest, claiming the space. He signaled for a drink without saying a word, just a flick of 2 fingers. That was when he saw her. She wasn't looking at him. That was the first offense. Everyone looked at John Rossi. Fear, lust, envy, he fed on it. But the waitress weaving through the tables with a tray of crystal flutes seemed entirely unaware of his existence. She was striking, but not in the plastic, manicured way John was used to. She had dark hair pulled back in a severe, messy bun, revealing a sharp jawline and a long, elegant neck. Her uniform was standard black, but she wore it with a strange, rigid posture. "Hey," John snapped his fingers as she passed his booth. "You? Drink." She stopped. She didn't flinch. She turned slowly, her face a blank mask of professional indifference. Her eyes were a startling, icy blue, creating a jarring contrast with her dark features. "My section is the floor, sir," she said, her voice low and raspy. "Your server will be with you shortly." She turned to leave. John felt a hot flush of irritation crawl up his neck. The table went silent. Luca shifted uncomfortably. Nobody walked away from John Rossi. "I didn't ask about your section," John said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "I told you to get me a drink. Macallan 25. Neat, now." The waitress paused. She looked at the tray in her hand, then back at him. For a split second, John thought he saw a spark of something in her eyes. Not fear, but amusement. Dark, condescending amusement. "I'll let the bartender know," she said flatly, and walked away. John slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "Who is that?" "New girl," Adrian muttered, scanning the room for threats. Name tag said Sasha. Started 2 weeks ago. Keeps to herself. "She's disrespectful," John hissed. "I don't like disrespectful things. They need to be broken." He watched her move across the room. She was graceful, efficient, but there was a heaviness to her steps, a groundedness that didn't fit a waitress carrying martinis. "Luca," John said, his eyes fixed on Sasha's back. "Bring the manager here, and tell him I want her serving this table all night. I'm going to have some fun." 10 minutes later, Sasha was standing at the edge of the VIP booth. The manager, a sweating, balding man named Mr. Henderson, had practically begged her to take the table. "Just pour the wine, keep your head down, and whatever you do, don't look him in the eye," Henderson had whispered, his hands shaking as he handed her the bottle of Chateau Margaux, 2015. Sasha held the bottle with practiced ease. She approached the table, feeling the heat of 4 pairs of eyes on her. She knew exactly who John Rossi was. You didn't work in New York's underworld, even on the fringes, without knowing the Rossis. Violent, expansive, and sloppy. She uncorked the bottle smoothly. "Chateau Margaux, sir." John didn't look at the wine. He looked at her wrists. No jewelry, no watch. Just faint, white scars that vanished into her sleeves. "Pour," he commanded. Sasha leaned in. As the dark red liquid flowed into the crystal glass, John moved his leg. It was subtle, a quick jerk of his knee beneath the table that knocked against her shin. It was designed to make her stumble, to make her spill the $1,000 wine on his $10,000 suit, giving him the excuse to destroy her. But Sasha didn't stumble. Her body adjusted instantly, her center of gravity shifting with a martial artist's precision. She absorbed the impact, the bottle remaining perfectly steady. Not a drop was spilled. She finished the pour, twisted the bottle to catch the drip, and set it down. "Enjoy," she said. John stared at the glass, then up at her. His jaw tightened. He had kicked her hard enough to bruise, yet she hadn't even blinked. "You have good balance, Sasha," he sneered. "Used to working on your knees?" The guards chuckled darkly. Lucas smirked, cracking his knuckles. Sasha's face remained stone. "I used to work on a boat. Rough seas." "Is that so?" John picked up the glass, swirled it, and then, with a casual flick of his wrist, tossed the entire contents of the glass onto her apron. The red stain bloomed across her chest instantly. The lounge went deadly silent. The jazz band stopped playing. "Oops," John said, his smile cruel and wide. "Rough seas in here too, it seems. Clean that up." Sasha looked down at the stain. She took a slow breath. When she looked up, the air in the booth dropped 10 degrees. "That's a waste of a good vintage," she said softly. John stood up, towering over her. He was 6'3", imposing, radiating violence. He stepped into her personal space, looming. "I can buy the vineyard, sweetheart. I can buy this club. I can buy the apartment you sleep in, and burn it down while you watch. Do you understand who I am?" Sasha held his gaze. "You're John Rossi, the man who thinks fear is currency." John's eyes widened. "And you're a nobody waitress who just lost her job." He turned to the trembling manager who had materialized nearby. "Henderson, fire her, now, and ensure she doesn't get hired anywhere in this city again. If I see her working a taco stand in Queens, I'll burn that down too." Henderson looked like he was about to faint. "Sasha, I'm so sorry. You have to go. Please, just go." Sasha untied her apron slowly. She folded it, covering the wine stain, and placed it gently on the table next to John's drink. "You're right, Mr. Rossi," Sasha said, her voice clear enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "I don't fit in here." She leaned in close, so close her breath brushed his ear. John flinched, his hand instinctively going to the gun inside his jacket. "But be careful, John," she whispered. "When you treat people like trash, you forget that some trash is toxic. Check your pockets." She pulled back, gave him a small, chilling smile, and walked away. John frowned. He patted his jacket pocket. His wallet was gone. "What the—" He checked the inside pocket. His phone was gone too. He spun around, rage exploding in his chest. "She took my wallet! She took my phone! Get her!" Luca roared, jumping up. But the club floor was crowded. The waitstaff were moving. The patrons were standing up, confused by the shouting. By the time Luca and Adrian pushed through the crowd to the front door, the street was empty. The rain was still falling, washing away the footprints. John stood in the doorway of the club, his face turning a violent shade of red. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the phone. It was the insult. A waitress, a nobody, had just pickpocketed the head of the Rossi crime family in front of his entire crew. "Find her!" John growled, his voice trembling with a dark promise. "I don't care what it takes. Find her. I'm going to teach that girl a lesson she won't live to remember." Little did he know, Sasha was already 3 blocks away, stripping off the wet uniform in an alleyway, revealing a tactical suit underneath. She pulled a burner phone from her boot and dialed a number. "Target confirmed," she said into the rain. "John Rossi is exactly the arrogant prick we thought he was. Phase 1 is complete. I have his phone. I have his access codes." A voice on the other end crackled. "Careful, Agent 4. If he catches you—" "He won't catch me," Sasha said, tossing the burner into a dumpster. "He's too busy looking for a waitress. He has no idea he just invited the devil to dinner." The ride back to the Rossi estate in the Hamptons was usually a time for decompression, a time to sip scotch and count the day's profits. Tonight, the silence in the armored SUV was deafening. It was a suffocating, violent silence that made Luca and Adrian stare strictly at the road ahead, terrified to breathe too loudly. John sat in the back, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles were white. He wasn't just angry, he was unmoored. For the first time in a decade, he felt exposed. His phone contained everything: contacts, bank codes for offshore accounts in the Caymans, the GPS locations of his shipments coming in from Naples. "Silas," John barked into the car's intercom system, "tell me you have a lock on it." Silas was the Rossi family's cyber-security specialist, a twitchy genius who operated out of the basement of the estate. His voice crackled through the speakers, trembling slightly. I'm trying, boss. The signal is bouncing." She didn't turn it off, which is strange. Usually a thief kills the SIM card immediately. She's keeping it active on purpose. "Where is she?" John demanded. "It's moving. Southbound on the FDR drive. Wait, it stopped. It's stationary. Hell's Kitchen, specifically an old industrial block on West 47th. "Hell's Kitchen," John muttered. "Appropriate." He looked at Luca. "Turn the car around. We aren't going home. We're going hunting." "Boss," Luca said cautiously, "it could be a trap. If she has the phone active, she wants us to come." "I know she wants me to come," John said, a cold, predatory smile touching his lips. "And I'm going to oblige her. Call the cleanup crew. I want that building surrounded. Nobody comes out unless they're in a body bag." They arrived at the location 40 minutes later. It was a derelict boxing gym called the Iron Canvas. The windows were boarded up with plywood, and the neon sign flickered with a dying buzz, OEN 24 HURS. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour. John stepped out of the car, ignoring the umbrella Adrian offered. He wanted the cold. It sharpened his senses. He drew his custom Beretta 92 FS Inox, checking the chamber. "Stay at the perimeter," John ordered his men. "Luca, you're with me. Adrian, watch the back exit." John kicked the front door open. It gave way with a rusted screech. Inside, the gym smelled of stale sweat, old leather, and bleach. Shadows clung to the corners of the room. In the center, a single boxing ring was illuminated by a solitary hanging bulb that swayed gently in the draft, casting moving shadows across the canvas. And there, sitting perfectly in the center of the ring on a wooden stool, was his phone. John approached slowly, his gun raised. The silence was heavy, oppressive. He scanned the rafters, the locker room doors, the piles of old gym mats. Nothing. He holstered his gun and stepped through the ropes. He picked up the phone. It was unlocked. On the screen was a video playing on a loop. It was footage from inside the jazz club, taken from a security camera angle that shouldn't have been accessible. It showed John tripping Sasha. It showed him pouring the wine on her. But then the video zoomed in on Sasha's face. In slow motion, as the wine hit her, she wasn't flinching. She was calculating. The video froze on her eyes. Text appeared on the screen in bold red letters. Lesson 1. Arrogance blinds you." Suddenly the phone rang in his hand. Caller ID, unknown. John swiped answer. "You think this is a game?" "It is a game, John." Sasha's voice came through, clear and calm. "But you're losing." "Where are you?" he growled, spinning around, scanning the darkness of the gym. "I'm close enough to smell that expensive cologne you wear to cover the scent of blood," she said. "I checked your files, by the way. The shipment coming into Port Newark tonight, the one with the olive oil. The DEA just got an anonymous tip. They're raiding it right now." John's blood ran cold. That shipment was worth $40 million. It was guns, not oil. "You're dead," John whispered. "I will find you and I will tear you apart." "You're focused on the money," Sasha sighed, sounding bored. "That's why you're weak. You should be focused on the laser dot on your chest." John froze. He looked down. A tiny red dot was dancing right over his heart. "Luca!" John shouted, diving to the floor of the ring. Crack! A bullet whizzed past where his head had been a microsecond before, embedding itself in the turnbuckle. "Sniper!" Luca roared, overturning a heavy metal table for cover. "Boss, get down!" "She's here," John hissed, crawling across the canvas, his adrenaline spiking. This wasn't a waitress. This wasn't a thief. This was a professional hit. But as he peeked over the edge of the ring, looking up towards the skylight where the shot had come from, he saw something that didn't make sense. A figure in black tactical gear was grappling with another figure on the catwalks above. The shot hadn't been meant for him. Or rather, the shooter had been interrupted. Sasha's voice came through the phone, which was still clutched in his hand. "You're welcome, by the way," she said, slightly breathless now. "That was a Volkov assassin. Seems I'm not the only one who hates you. Now, are you going to hide under the ropes, or are you going to help me kill these Russians?" John Rossi was a man of violence, but he was usually the conductor, not the instrument. Tonight, the orchestra had gone rogue. He looked up at the catwalks. Two shadows were fighting. Brutal, close-quarters combat. One was large and bulky, the other was lithe and fast. "Luca, the rafters, hostiles!" John yelled. More shots rang out. But they weren't coming from the catwalk. The back doors of the gym burst open, and 5 men carrying AK-47s stormed in. They wore balaclavas and heavy coats, the Volkov Bratva. The Russian mob had been encroaching on Rossi territory for months, but a hit this brazen? This was war. "Kill them all!" one of the Russians shouted in thick, accented English. Bullets shredded the boxing ring. John scrambled off the canvas, rolling behind a stack of heavy punching bags. Luca returned fire, his Desert Eagle booming like a cannon in the enclosed space. John popped up, firing 2 precise shots. One Russian went down, but they were pinned. The angles were bad. Suddenly a body fell from the ceiling. It was the sniper from the catwalk. He landed with a sickening crunch in the center of the ring, unconscious or dead. A second later, a cable unspooled, and Sasha dropped down. She didn't land in the ring. She swung wide, using the momentum to crash feet first into one of the Russians by the door. She was a blur of motion. She wasn't wearing the waitress uniform anymore. She was clad in black cargo pants, a fitted tactical vest, and combat boots. Her hair was loose now, wild and wet from the rain. John watched, mesmerized as she moved. It was a dance of absolute efficiency. She disarmed the Russian she had kicked, twisted his arm until it snapped, and used him as a human shield against his comrades. She drew a knife from her boot, a jagged karambit, and slashed the thigh of another attacker. "She's on our side," Luca yelled, reloading his magazine. "For now," John shouted. He saw an opening. John broke from cover, sprinting toward the office door on the far side of the gym. He needed a better vantage point. He saw a Russian aiming at Sasha's exposed back. "Sasha, 3 o'clock!" John roared. She didn't question him. She dropped instantly into a slide. The bullets meant for her spine shattered the mirror behind her. From the ground, she fired a single shot from a pistol she'd swiped from the first gunman. The Russian dropped. The room fell silent. 7 men lay groaning or still on the floor. The smell of cordite and blood was overwhelming. Sasha stood up slowly. She was breathing hard, a small cut on her cheek bleeding freely. She wiped it with the back of her gloved hand and looked at John. John walked toward her, stepping over the bodies. His gun was at his side, but he didn't holster it. They stood 3 feet apart. The tension between them was electric, sharper than the gunpowder in the air. "You saved me," John said, his voice low. "I saved my investment," Sasha corrected. She holstered her stolen weapon. "If the Volkovs kill you, the power vacuum in New York creates chaos. I don't like chaos." "Who are you?" John stepped closer. He could see the adrenaline dilating her pupils. He could smell the rain on her skin. "You're no waitress. You're no cop. Cops don't fight like that." "I'm the person holding your life in her hands," she said. John laughed, a short, disbelief-filled sound. "You stole my phone. You humiliated me. You tipped off the DEA about my shipment. And now you save my life from a Russian hit squad. What is this? Do you want me dead or alive?" "I want you obedient," Sasha said calmly. John's eyes narrowed. He reached out, grabbing her wrist. He expected her to pull away or flip him. She didn't. She let him hold her. Her skin was warm. "Nobody owns John Rossi," he whispered, pulling her slightly closer. "I could kill you right now. My men are outside." "Your men are dead, John," she said softly. John froze. "What?" "The Volkovs didn't just come with 5 guys. They hit your perimeter first. Luca and I are the only ones left standing in here. Take a look." John looked towards the front entrance. Through the broken door, he could see the bodies of Adrian and Cole lying in the rain. A cold pit opened in his stomach. He was alone. Alone with a woman who was infinitely more dangerous than he had realized. "Why?" John asked, his voice raw. "Why help me?" Sasha stepped in, closing the gap. She was shorter than him, but she felt like the giant in the room. She reached into a tactical vest and pulled out his wallet. She slapped it against his chest. "Because the Volkovs aren't just your enemy, John. They're mine. And right now, you're the only man in this city with enough firepower to help me destroy them." "You want an alliance," John realized. The absurdity of it hit him. A waitress proposing a partnership with a Mafia don. "I want a weapon," she corrected. "You want your city back. The Volkovs are moving a nuclear trigger through the port in 3 days. That's what they were clearing the way for. That's why they wanted you dead tonight." "A nuke?" John stepped back. "We run drugs, gambling, prostitution. We don't do terrorism." "They do," Sasha said grimly. "I'm an independent contractor, former MI6. I've been tracking Viktor Volkov for 3 years. He killed my team in Berlin. I'm going to burn his empire to the ground." She looked up at him, her blue eyes blazing. "You lost your shipment tonight because of me. Consider that my resume. I can hurt you, or I can help you save your city from turning into a radioactive crater. Your choice, King of Manhattan." John looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the fire, the competence, the brokenness hidden deep inside. He felt a pull he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just lust. Though looking at her in that tactical gear, blood on her cheek, he certainly felt that. It was respect. "If I say yes," John said, "I'm in charge." Sasha smirked. It was the same smirk she'd given him in the club. "Cute, but we can argue about who's on top later. Right now, we need to move. More Russians are coming." John holstered his gun. He grabbed his wallet and shoved it into his pocket. "My car is armored," he said. "Do you know how to drive a Rolls-Royce under fire?" Sasha headed for the door, reloading her pistol. "John, I can drive a tank, blindfolded. Try to keep up." As they ran into the rainy night, leaving the carnage of the gym behind, John Rossi realized 2 things. First, his life as a simple crime boss was over. And second, he was dangerously close to falling in love with the woman who had just ruined him. The safe house wasn't a bunker. It was a penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, a glass box in the sky that cost $12 million and didn't appear on any deed or tax record. John, Sasha, and Luca rode the private elevator in silence. The adrenaline from the gym shootout was fading, replaced by the throbbing ache of bruises and the stinging of cuts. John leaned against the mirrored wall, watching Sasha. She was checking the magazine of her pistol, her movements mechanical, efficient, but her hands were trembling ever so slightly. "You're shaking," John noted, his voice rough. Sasha looked up, her blue eyes dark. Adrenaline crash, sugar levels dropping, and I'm bleeding. The elevator dinged. They stepped into a sprawling, minimalist living room bathed in the glow of the city skyline. "Luca," John ordered, "secure the perimeter downstairs. Get the medical kit from the master bath, and order food, lots of it." Luca nodded, looking at Sasha with a newfound, terrified respect, and disappeared down the hall. John walked to the wet bar and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He slid one across the marble counter to Sasha. "Bourbon," he said. "It helps with the sting." Sasha took the glass, downed it in one swallow, and hissed. She sat on one of the white leather bar stools and began unbuckling her tactical vest. "I need needle and thread, and rubbing alcohol." 10 minutes later, John found himself in a position no one in his organization would believe. He was sitting shirtless on his own couch while the woman who had robbed him an hour ago stitched a gash on his shoulder. "You have a lot of scars," Sasha murmured, her fingers cool against his heated skin. She tied off a suture with surgical precision. "Hazards of the trade," John grunted, watching her face. She was focused, her guard down just an inch. "You have a few yourself?" He gestured to a jagged white line running down her collarbone, visible where her tactical shirt was torn. Sasha paused. She touched the scar absently. "Berlin, 3 years ago, the night Volkov killed my team." John shifted, turning to face her. "Tell me." Sasha sighed, pouring alcohol onto a cotton pad to clean a cut on her own cheek. It was a standard extraction. "We were getting a defector out. Volkov found us. He didn't just kill them, John. He hunted them. He laughed while he did it. He put a bullet in my partner's head and left me for dead in a burning warehouse." She looked up, and the raw vulnerability in her eyes slammed into John harder than a bullet. "I'm not MI6 anymore, because they wouldn't let me pursue him," she whispered. "They said it was too politically sensitive. So I went rogue. I've spent every day since then planning his funeral." John reached out. This time he didn't grab her wrist. He gently cupped her jaw, his thumb brushing away a smear of dirt. "He's in my city," John said, his voice a low vow. "He attacked my men. He disrespected me. And he hurt you." Sasha's breath hitched. "You don't even know me, John. I'm the girl who spilled wine on your suit." "You're the only person who's ever looked me in the eye and didn't blink," John corrected. "We kill him. Together. We burn his empire down." The air between them changed. It wasn't just an alliance anymore. It was gravity. John leaned in, testing the water. Sasha didn't pull back. Her eyes fluttered shut. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It tasted of bourbon, blood, and desperation. It was a collision of 2 violent worlds finding a common orbit. Sasha's hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, her touch igniting a fire in his chest that had nothing to do with rage. For a moment, the King of Manhattan and the rogue spy were just a man and a woman trying to survive the night. They broke apart when Luca cleared his throat loudly from the hallway. "Boss," Luca said, staring at the floor, his face bright red. "Food's here, and Silas sent the schematics for the port." Sasha pulled away, breathless, her cheeks flushed. She immediately went into soldier mode, though her eyes lingered on John's lips. "Right," she said, her voice steadying. "The port. Volkov is moving the device at 0200 hours. We have 3 hours to plan an assault on a fortress guarded by 50 Russian mercenaries. Sakaman." John buttoned a fresh shirt, hiding his bandages. He walked to the table where Luca had spread out the blueprints. He looked at Sasha, a dangerous smirk returning to his face. 50 mercenaries, John said. Good. I was worried it would be too easy. Port Newark was a graveyard of steel containers and rusted cranes, shrouded in a thick, freezing fog coming off the Atlantic. The rain had stopped, but the wind whipped through the alleyways of shipping crates, howling like a banshee. John and Sasha lay prone on top of a stack of containers, 40 feet in the air. Below them, Sector 4 was lit up by floodlights. Armed men patrolled the perimeter. In the center, a black SUV was parked next to a massive red shipping container. "That's him," Sasha whispered, lowering her thermal binoculars. "Viktor Volkov." John squinted. He saw a man in a white fur coat stepping out of the SUV. Volkov was older, scarred, with a face that looked like it had been chiseled out of granite. He was smoking a cigar, looking relaxed, as if he weren't standing in the middle of a hostile takeover. "He looks comfortable," John muttered. "I hate it when they look comfortable." "He thinks he's untouchable," Sasha said. She adjusted the earpiece. "Luca, are you in position?" "In the crane, boss." Luca's voice crackled in their ears. "I've got the sniper rifle. I can take out the 2 guards by the SUV, but Volkov is behind bulletproof glass." "Hold fire," John ordered. "We need to get close. If that nuclear trigger is in the container, one stray bullet sets off a failsafe or damages the goods. We go in quiet." "Quiet isn't really my style," John added, checking his silenced Vector SMG. "Learn fast," Sasha said. She clipped a zip line to the crane cable above them. "On my mark, we drop behind the generator, sweep the left flank, and breach the container from the rear." "Mark," John said. They descended into the shadows. The infiltration was a masterclass in violence. Sasha moved like smoke. She slipped behind a patrolling guard, covered his mouth, and drove a knife into his kidney before he could make a sound. John was more brutal, but equally effective. He snapped the neck of a mercenary who turned the corner too fast, dragging the body into the darkness between crates. They moved in perfect sync, a deadly rhythm established without words. John covered the high angles. Sasha cleared the corners. They were 10 yards from the red container. "Clear," Sasha signaled with a hand gesture. She moved to the container door. It was locked with a digital keypad. She pulled out a decoding device, wiring it to the panel. "Cover me," she whispered. 30 seconds. John turned his back to her, aiming his weapon at the SUV where Volkov was standing, laughing with one of his lieutenants. 20 seconds. The decoder beeped softly. 10 seconds. "Got it," Sasha whispered. The lock clicked. She swung the heavy steel door open. John turned to look inside. The container was empty. "What?" Sasha froze. "No, the intel was solid. The heat signature." Suddenly, floodlights blinded them from inside the container. It wasn't empty. It was a stage. And sitting in a chair in the middle of the empty container, smiling at them, was a man tied to a chair. It was Silas, John's cybersecurity specialist. He was beaten, bloody, and wired with C4 explosives. "I'm sorry, boss," Silas sobbed. They made me send the fake location." "Trap!" John roared, grabbing Sasha and throwing her to the ground behind the heavy steel door, just as a sniper round pinged off the metal where her head had been. "Welcome to the party, Mr. Rossi." Volkov's voice boomed over a loudspeaker. The port exploded with noise. 50 mercenaries emerged from the shadows, surrounding the container. They were pinned. "Silas gave you up," Sasha hissed, checking her ammo. "We're sitting ducks." "I knew I should have fired him," John growled. He peeked out. Bullets chewed up the pavement inches from his face. "We can't fight 50 men, Sasha. Not from here." "We don't have to," Sasha said. She pulled a remote detonator from her vest. John looked at her, eyes wide. "What is that?" "I told you I like insurance," she said. "I planted charges on the fuel tanks of the cranes while we were climbing down." "You're going to blow up my port?" John yelled over the gunfire. "It's either the port or us," Sasha yelled back. "Do it!" Sasha pressed the button. Boom! The night turned into day. 2 massive cranes to their left exploded in a fireball, toppling over. The structure groaned and collapsed onto the line of mercenaries, creating a wall of fire and twisted metal. The chaos was instantaneous. Screams, confusion, and secondary explosions rocked the dock. "Move!" John grabbed her hand. They sprinted through the smoke, using the falling debris as cover. But Volkov wasn't running. He was standing by his SUV, calm, watching the fire. He raised a heavy revolver and fired blindly into the smoke. John felt the impact before he heard the shot. It hit him in the side, spinning him around. He went down hard, gasping, his hand clutching his ribs. Blood seeped through his fingers, dark and fast. "John!" Sasha skidded to a stop, dropping to her knees beside him. "Go!" John wheezed, his face turning pale. "Get to Luca. I'll hold them off." "Shut up!" Sasha snapped, grabbing him by the vest. "I'm not leaving you. We finish this." "Sasha, look!" John pointed. Through the clearing smoke, Volkov was walking toward them. He wasn't alone. 6 of his elite guard, Spetsnaz veterans, were with him. They had them surrounded. Sasha raised her gun, but it clicked empty. She drew her knife. Volkov stopped 10 feet away. He looked at John bleeding on the ground, and then at Sasha standing over him like a protective lioness. "So," Volkov said, his voice thick with a Russian accent, smiling cruelly. "The agent and the king. A romantic ending. I will enjoy watching the light leave your eyes, Agent 4. But first, I think I will make you watch me skin your new boyfriend alive." Sasha tightened her grip on the knife. She looked down at John. His eyes were glazing over, but he was reaching for his ankle holster. "One chance," John whispered to her, slipping a small flashbang grenade into her hand. "Make it count." Volkov raised his gun, aiming at Sasha's forehead. "Goodbye, little ghost." Sasha pulled the pin. The pin pinged against the asphalt, a tiny sound swallowed by the roaring fires of the collapsed cranes. Volkov saw the small metal cylinder in Sasha's hand a fraction of a second too late. His eyes, predatory and arrogant, widened in realization. But the instinct to shield himself lagged behind the speed of the fuse. "Close your eyes!" Sasha screamed, throwing the flashbang at the feet of the Spetsnaz elite. Bang! It wasn't just a noise, it was a physical blow. A sphere of magnesium-white light, brighter than the sun, detonated in the center of the docks. It shredded the darkness, searing the retinas of anyone foolish enough to be looking. Volkov and his 6 guards howled, stumbling back. The disorientation was total. Their inner ears scrambled by the concussive blast. They flailed blindly, their rifles swinging uselessly in the smoke. But Sasha had already moved. She was a phantom in the haze, her eyes squeezed shut until the moment of detonation passed. Now, she opened them to a chaotic grey world. John, bleeding and grounded, was far from helpless. As the guards staggered, clutching their faces, he rolled onto his back. He didn't have the strength to stand, but his aim was steady. He raised the compact Glock, 26 he'd pulled from his ankle holster. Pop, pop, pop! 3 precise shots cut through the smoke. 3 guards dropped, their chests erupting in red mist before they even realized they were targets. "Luca, now!" Sasha yelled into her comms as she sprinted forward. She didn't run for cover. She ran straight at the devil. Volkov was disoriented, rubbing his eyes with his left hand, his massive revolver waving dangerously in his right. He was blinking rapidly, tears streaming down his face, trying to clear his vision. Sasha hit him like a freight train. She didn't have his size, but she had velocity. She slammed her shoulder into his solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. They crashed onto the wet, oil-slicked pavement, a tangle of limbs and fury. Volkov's gun skittered away into the darkness. He roared, a primal, animalistic sound, and swung a backhand blindly. His fist, the size of a sledgehammer, connected with the side of Sasha's head. The world spun. Sasha tasted copper. She was thrown backward, rolling to a stop near the edge of the wharf. Her vision swam, black spots dancing in her eyes. "You think you can blind me?" Volkov spat, scrambling to his feet. He was blinking the spots away, his vision returning. He drew a serrated combat knife from his belt. "I have fought in Chechnya. I have fought in the gulag. You are nothing but a broken little girl playing soldier." He lunged. Sasha forced her body to move. She didn't retreat. She pivoted. As Volkov slashed downward, aiming to carve her open from shoulder to hip, she stepped inside his guard. It was a move of suicidal bravery. She caught his wrist with both hands, twisting her hips to use his own momentum against him. But Volkov was immensely strong. He didn't flip. He locked his arm, halting her throw, and slammed his forehead into her nose. Crack! Blood poured down Sasha's face. She stumbled back, gasping. "Berlin," Volkov taunted, stepping closer, the knife weaving patterns in the air. "I remember now. Your team. They cried for their mothers. I will make sure you cry for yours." John watched from 20 feet away, his vision graying out. He tried to lift his gun, but his hand was shaking uncontrollably. The loss of blood was shutting him down. "Sasha," he croaked, the sound barely a whisper. Sasha wiped the blood from her eyes. She saw John fading. She saw the monster in front of her, and something inside her, the cold, calculated part of her that MI6 had tried to bury, snapped back into place. "They didn't cry," Sasha said, her voice eerily calm amidst the burning chaos. She reached into her boot and pulled out her own blade, a curved karambit. "They fought, and so do I." She didn't wait for him this time. She attacked. It was a flurry of steel. Volkov slashed. Sasha parried. Sparks flew as the knives ground against each other. She was faster, slicing his forearm, his thigh, his cheek. He was stronger, forcing her back, his blade grazing her ribs, cutting through the tactical fabric. Volkov cornered her against a shipping container. He raised his knife for a killing thrust, a cruel smile stretching his bloody face. "Die, little ghost." Thwack! The sound was wet and heavy. Volkov froze. His eyes went wide. His knife hand dropped, useless. A high-caliber bullet had punched clean through his right shoulder, shattering the joint. High above, in the cab of the swaying crane, Luca racked the bolt of his sniper rifle. "Nobody touches the boss's girl," he muttered. Volkov screamed, dropping the knife, clutching his ruined shoulder. He fell to his knees, his dominance shattered in an instant. Sasha didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, kicking him in the chest, knocking him flat on his back. She stood over him, the fires of the burning port framing her like an avenging angel. She picked up his dropped revolver from the puddle of water. She cocked the hammer. Volkov looked up. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the terrified realization of mortality. He coughed, blood bubbling at his lips. "Wait," he gurgled. "I have money. Codes. I can give you half of Moscow." "I don't want your money, Victor," Sasha said softly. Her blue eyes were harder than diamonds. "I want to silence the ghosts. Please, class is dismissed." Bang! The gunshot echoed across the water, final and absolute. The king of the Russian mob lay still, his reign of terror ended by the waitress he had underestimated. Sasha stood there for a second, the gun hanging loosely in her hand. The adrenaline that had been holding her together evaporated. Her knees buckled, and the world tilted sideways. "Sasha!" The shout was raw, filled with pain. "John!" She dropped the gun and scrambled toward him. He was lying in a pool of blood that looked terrifyingly large in the flickering light. His skin was the color of ash. "John!" she choked out, pressing her hands frantically against the wound in his side. "Stay with me! Look at me!" His eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow and ragged. He reached up, his hand trembling, and touched her face. He smeared blood on her cheek, but neither of them cared. "Did you get him?" John whispered, his voice sounding like gravel. "I got him," she sobbed, tears cutting tracks through the grime on her face. "He's gone. It's over. Just hold on." The roar of an engine cut through the night. The armored Rolls-Royce Phantom smashed through a wooden barricade, drifting sideways and screeching to a halt next to them. The passenger door flew open before the wheels stopped moving. "Boss!" Luca jumped out, his face pale with panic. He grabbed John under the arms, lifting him with brute strength. "We have to move. The cops are 2 minutes out." "Hospital," Sasha ordered, helping Luca shove John into the back seat. "The trauma center in Yonkers. We have a doctor on payroll there. Go!" As the car tore away, tires screaming on the asphalt, Sasha climbed into the back with John. She ripped the hem of her tactical shirt, creating a makeshift compression bandage. "Drive faster, Luca!" she screamed toward the front. "I'm doing 110, Luca yelled back, swerving through traffic on the Jersey Turnpike. John's head lolled against the leather seat. He looked at Sasha. She was a mess, bruised, bleeding, terrified, but she was fighting for him with the same ferocity she had used against Volkov. "Hey," he whispered. Sasha looked down, her hands pressing hard on his ribs. "Don't talk. Save your energy." "You're fired," John breathed, a ghost of a smirk touching his lips. Sasha froze, tears spilling over. "What?" "As a waitress," he murmured, his eyes struggling to stay focused on hers. "You're terrible at it. Worst service I've ever had." Sasha let out a wet, choked laugh. "I'll work on my customer service skills." John's hand found hers, squeezing weakly. "No, don't. I like you. Dangerous. As a partner, you're hired." "I accept the position," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "Now please, John, just live." His grip slackened. His eyes slid shut. "John?" Sasha shook him. "John!" The car sped into the night, racing against death itself. 3 weeks later. The rain had returned to New York, but inside the velvet room, the air was warm and scented with expensive cigars and victory. The club had changed. The security was tighter, the clientele more exclusive. The whispers in the room weren't about which mob boss was warring with whom. They were about the new power that had solidified over the city, a power that didn't just rule the streets, but owned the shadows. The double doors swung open. The conversation in the room died instantly. John Rossi walked in. He leaned slightly on a black cane, topped with a silver lion's head, favoring his left side. But the injury hadn't diminished him. If anything, it made him look more formidable. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than most cars, his dark hair perfectly styled. But no one was looking at John. They were looking at the woman on his arm. Sasha wore a backless gown of liquid emerald silk that clung to her curves like a second skin. It revealed the fading scar on her shoulder, a badge of honor she refused to hide with makeup. Her hair was loose, cascading in dark waves down her back. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, cold and sharp. She didn't walk like a waitress anymore. She walked like she owned the building, the block, and the city. They moved through the parted crowd towards the VIP booth, the semicircular throne overlooking the floor. Mr. Henderson, the manager who had once fired her, rushed forward. He was trembling so hard the menus in his hand shook. "Mr. Rossi." "Miss Sasha," Henderson stammered, bowing low. "It is an honor. Truly. Your table is ready. Can I get you anything?" John sat down, easing his injured side onto the velvet. He looked at Sasha, his eyes dark with a mixture of pride and intense, burning possessiveness. "What do you think, Kara?" John asked, his voice low. "The Macallan 25. Sasha sat beside him, not across. She crossed her legs, the slit in her dress revealing a glimpse of the tactical knife she still strapped to her thigh beneath the silk. She looked at Henderson. Her blue eyes were cool, amused and terrifying. "Actually," Sasha said, her voice smooth as velvet, "bring the bottle, and 2 glasses. I'll pour this time." Henderson paled. Of course. Immediately. He scrambled away as if his life depended on it, which it probably did. John chuckled, a rich, genuine sound. He reached out and took her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. "You enjoy terrified people a little too much," he teased. "I enjoy respect," Sasha corrected, leaning her head on his shoulder. "There's a difference." She looked out over the club. She saw the fear, the awe, the deference. The Volkov territory had been absorbed. The shipments were secure. The Rossi family was no longer just a crime syndicate. It was an empire, fortified by an intelligence network that rivaled the CIA. "They're calling us the King and Queen of Manhattan," John murmured, kissing her temple. "How does it feel?" Sasha turned to him. She cupped his jaw, her eyes softening only for him. "It feels like I finally found a job I can't get fired from," she whispered. John smirked. "Oh, you're on a permanent contract. No sick days, no holidays." "And the benefits?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. John leaned in, his lips brushing hers. "I'm the benefit." Sasha laughed and she kissed him, a deep, searing kiss that claimed him as thoroughly as he had claimed the city. "Fair enough," she said, pulling back as Henderson arrived with the bottle. She took it, uncorked it with a flick of her wrist, and poured 2 perfect measures without spilling a drop. She slid a glass to John. "To the lesson," she said, raising her glass. John clinked his glass against hers. "To the teacher." They drank, watching the room watch them. The waitress had served her final table, but the Queen had just begun her reign. And that is the story of how John Rossi, the most feared man in New York, learned that you never, ever judge a book by its cover, especially when that book is a trained assassin. From spilling wine to spilling blood, Sasha proved that true power isn't about fear. It's about respect. If you enjoyed this twist-filled Mafia romance, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Did you like Sasha's revenge, or did you think John got off too easy? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. We drop new dramas every week. Thanks for listening. And remember, be careful who you mess with. You never know who they really are.